How's it going, guys? So for this video I'm going to be putting all of the Premier League strikers into a tier list ranked from D to S, with D being for the players who are not that great, C being for the players that are okay but I'm not fully convinced by them, B is for the Premier League standard players, A is for the high Premier League standard players, and then of course S is for the best of the best. The main criteria for this is that I'll only be doing the main striker from each team, so the player I'm picking has to be the player that the manager considers to be their number 9. So with all that being said, let's get to it. For Arsenal, I'm going with Lacazette and I'm putting him in the B tier. I know that a lot of Arsenal fans will be miffed that I'm not picking Aubameyang since he would undoubtedly finish higher, but has he even played up front once since Mikel Arteta has taken over? It's clear that to Arteta he's a winger, so I've had to roll with Lacazette. Since joining the Gunners, Lacazette has had a mixed bag of performances. He's finished with at least 10 goals in each season, which isn't bad, but it's definitely not great, so I think B tier is perfectly fine for him. Aston Villa, I've gone for Ollie Watkins and I'm also putting him in the B tier. Initially I was really tempted to put him in the A tier, but I had a look back at his previous seasons and he did get 26 goals last year for Brentford in the Championship, but the 2 seasons before that he only got 10 goals despite being a first team starter. I don't want to get too carried away on the hype train with them, so I think for now he's a striker who knows what the goal is, but B tier is a good place for him. For Brighton, we have another striker who made his move to the Premier League following a prolific season for Brentford in the Championship in Neal Maupay. I'm putting him in the C tier, but don't get me wrong, I love Maupay, he's the king of shithousery. But even though he's already gotten 4 goals this season, when you weigh that against the 10 he got all last season, I think it's hard to argue that C tier is fair. For Burnley, I'm going with Chris Wood and I'm putting him in C tier as well. This was tough because I actually quite like Chris Wood and I pity the lad for having to share the pitch with a lump like Ashley Barnes. He's turned in decent seasons for Burnley over the last few years, especially since he's a striker playing for Burnley. But when you compare him to the 2 players already in Tier B, you can see why he's not quite at the same standard, so I had to settle for putting him in C tier. For Chelsea, this was a tough one. Timo Werner has played on the wing quite a few times this season, but I think that if Lampard has every player at his disposal, then he's starting Timo in the number 9 position, so I've gone with him, and I'm putting him in A tier. Now, as a Chelsea fan, I do of course love Timo Werner, but from what I've seen of him playing for us and the German national team as well as Leipzig, he does have a tendency to be a bit wasteful in front of goal, which has stopped him from moving into the top tier of this list. For Crystal Palace's Wilfried Zaha, I'm putting him in the B tier. Zaha is finally starting to get some game time up top. It's been tempting for Crystal Palace managers to play him on the wing in the past because he's so quick and skillful, but I always found that he drifted out of the games when playing on the wing, whereas now he's a constant goal threat. Everton's Dominic Calvert-Lewin I'm putting in A tier. About 6 months ago, if I was making this list, I probably would have said he was a B tier player on the fringes of going into the A tier, but now he's solidified himself in the second highest bracket. He's turned himself into the perfect striker operating between the opponent's 6-yard box and the penalty spot, and I think he's a great outside chance for the Golden Boot this season. Fulham's Mitrovic I'm putting in C tier. Mitrovic is a frustrating fellow to say the least. You never really know what you're going to get from him, but what Fulham have gotten from him this season is he's their top goal scorer and their top assister, even if he only has 2 goals, both of which came against Leeds. He's not showing it so far this season, but he has proved in the past that he is decent, but I don't think I could put him any higher than C tier. Leeds' Paddy Bamford I'm putting in C tier. Look, I know the guy is in the form of his life at the moment, but that doesn't change the fact that last season he only scored 16 goals in 45 appearances for the best team in the Championship. He may be going through a purple patch, but I still think he's a C tier player. Next up is Leicester's Jamie Vardy, and we have our first player to go into the S tier. Vardy has his haters, but there's no denying that he is a quality player. He's reached the 100 goal club extremely quickly. He holds the record for the most consecutive games scored in, and last season I think he also set the record for scoring in the first 8 games of the Premier League season. He is a class act. Liverpool's Bobby Firmino, B tier. And before the Liverpool fans jump down my throat, I do know that he's a good player and I know that he's an integral part of your overall system, But at the end of the day, I'm ranking strikers here, and strikers need to be rated on the goals they score, of which for him there's not that many, so I think B tier is fair. Manchester City's Kun Aguero is of course our next S tier player. Honestly, if the lad had done absolutely nothing since that moment against QPR nearly a decade ago in the last few seconds, I'd probably still put him in the S tier. When he finally moves on, he's going to go down a Manchester City and Premier League legend, and deservedly so. For Man United, it was tough to pick. Not so long ago it was Anthony Martial playing on the wing and Rashford playing up top, but for a good while now, Ole seemed to prefer playing Tony Martial up front, so I'm going with him and I'm putting him in A tier. He had his best season ever last season. I think he got 17 goals, and I still think that there's more to come from this guy. He's got the pace and the skills, and when he's on it, he can be ice cold in front of goal, but he just seems to turn it off and on whenever he feels like it. If he can continue the form that he found last season, then in a review of this list, he could go up to S tier. Newcastle's Callum Wilson, I'm putting in B tier. I feel quite bad for this guy. He's had such an injury-plagued career, but he does show that when he's playing, he gets goals. And I would love to see what kind of numbers he could rack up if he got a full injury-free season. Now we've Sheffield United, and this was a three-way toss-up between Ryan Brewster, who's their big summer signing, David McGoldrick, who's their top goal scorer so far, and Ollie McBurney, who I've actually gone for because he's played the most minutes, and I'm putting him in D tier. I don't think he's quite the lug that people make him out to be. I've seen him play in the Championship. He is a solid striker, but I think he's a Championship striker. Now we have Southampton's Danny Ings, who I'm putting into A tier. Here we have another player who's had an injury-plagued career. I think he was harshly called a flop at Liverpool, considering he spent pretty much the entire time there injured. But with that being said, I've no idea how Liverpool managed to command a £20 million transfer fee from Southampton. But since then, he's proven to be money well spent, and hopefully he can keep himself fit from now on. Now we have Tottenham Hotspur's Harry Kane, who of course is going into the S tier. He's probably the best striker in the league at the moment. He seems to have it all, and he'll probably lead England quite far in the Euros, which really pains me to say. Up next is West Brom's Callum Robinson, who unfortunately I'm putting into D tier. I'll admit I haven't watched every single game that Callum Robinson's ever played, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think that he's a winger. I'm not too sure why he's being played up top for West Brom, but apart from his couple of goals against Chelsea, I don't really think it's working. West Ham's Antonio I'm putting into B tier. Antonio's a player that I feel like every game I watch West Ham play, he scores in, but then he only finishes the season with around 10 goals. But still, he's a constant threat to defences, he's fast, he's strong, he does have a good shot on him, and I think B tier is fair. Last but definitely not least, we have Wolves' Raul Jimenez, who I'm putting into A tier. Of all the players in A tier, he was probably the closest to making it up to S tier, but I didn't think that he was quite on the same level as Kun Aguero and the likes, so I feel like A tier is quite fair for the Wolves big man. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you agree or disagree with where I have your team's player ranked, please do say so in the comments. Like if you did enjoy, subscribe for more footy chats, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.